Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode about the movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and for this week's episode, I'm joined by a new guest
Hi.
who's never done
Yeah.
the show before, who is just talked now. I was going to give you an introduction first, but that's okay. Uh, uh, joined this week by Mariano, or I'm going to call them Mary, for the remainder of this recording. But I figured I should do this formally and then go informally. So thank you for joining me for this week.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Actually, this is a really nice opportunity to be here.
Yeah, and before we get into the film that we're going to be discussing this week, do you just sort of want to explain sort of your general film taste, sort of favorite films, sort of what you enjoy, if you want to?
Okay, so my letterbox top four actually is La La Land, Marriage Story, Casablanca, and
Mhm.
Whiplash. I think those have something really in common. Maybe not Whiplash, but I'm really into love stories. That's something that I always
Mhm.
like. I like when my movie has that sort of romance tone into it. Also, I love comedies, but mostly I love movies that talk about relationships and well, personal struggles, which a lot of that
Mhm.
doesn't really translate to Gladiator. But I think, in particular, Gladiator, the first one is a movie that I absolutely adore as much as it doesn't really suit my taste of films.
Right, that's very good. Uh, so yeah, as you just mentioned, this week we are covering Gladiator because there
Yeah.
is a second Gladiator film coming out. In some parts of the world, it's coming out this week, actually, and some places comes out the following week, I believe. But here in Australia, I'm able to see it this week. Um,
Uh, Actually, same in Latin America. I think it's coming out this week as well. I'm seeing
mm,
on Thursday.
and yeah, so we're gonna be talking about Gladiator this week, which I had never seen before this recording. I was obviously aware of it. It's a very well known film, Best Picture winning, Best Actor winning, a very beloved film, very much definitely of its time. I don't know if it's quite held up to the same level of quality now. I feel like it's a film that sort of was very beloved. Sort of at the time it came out, but sort of now it sort of doesn't get talked about as much, sort of in the vein that it was when it first came out. So yeah, I mean, as I just said, I watched it for the first time earlier today. In fact, for the purposes of this, what was your sort of history with?
So actually, that's quite long. Although I did watch it for the first time like 2 weeks ago. It was playing in
Mhm,
theaters because of the release of Gladiator II, and I said, "All right, I'm gonna go watch it for the first time." It's a movie that I've been
mhm,
pushing so much because I really wanted to watch it, and that's because of a particular reason. It's my mother's favorite
mhm,
film of all time. She always talks about it.
mhm,
Like every time we talk about a movie, she always mentions Gladiator because she thinks it's like the greatest thing in the world. And I
mhm,
watched it because of her mainly, and because I really wanted to watch a
mhm,
new one, and I said, okay, I will go watch it. And I think it's quite a personal movie because of that relationship that he has to my family.
mhm,
Because my mother used to tell me that she watched it like all the time before I was even born, and while well, during my first years, she always watched it, and I don't think she took me to watch it or showed me the film yet, but it's a movie that's been quite present in my life because I always talk to my mother about movies, and she always
mhm,
brings it up because she thinks it's that great. And so I watched it,
mhm.
and although I don't think it's like that great, I thought it was a really really special movie for me. I loved it to begin with, and um, I think what really does with it is amazing. But I don't know how you can what you can say about it since yes, you said I saw it yesterday, well today for the first time, which is nuts actually.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been aware of the film for, like, a decade or so. Like, I've been aware of it for years and years and years, before I even really got massively into movies. It's a very much sort of a big part of, I think it's like, I think people still do really like Gladiator, but it's not seen in the way that it was seen 24 years ago, at least from my
Yeah,
sort of
100%.
perspective. I am not going to be as positive about this film as it seems like you are going to be.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't think it's a bad film. I do have some sort of. There are issues I have with the film, but it's sort of the main thing is it's an aesthetic that I don't really connect with. I don't really like the swords and sandals type. The setting, like in ancient Rome and with gladiators and everything, that's not really my kind of um, thing. I don't really know why, to be honest. It's just never something I've massively had an interest in of being like in terms of what I like to see in film. So it sort of, I mean, I think that's part of why I didn't connect with the film. I mean, we'll get into it more as we go on, but sort of talk about the film sort of in a general sense first. It's a Ridley Scott film who I've covered Ridley Scott a few times, a couple times on the podcast now. When I did the Alien episodes a few months ago, I think Ridley Scott. I mean, I don't know where you stand on Ridley Scott, but I think he's a very great director, but he's off. But he not often, but he's sometimes let down by the scripts for his films because I don't think he writes his films. I think he's just a director. Um, so I think that's sort of how I look at Ridley Scott as a creator. He's a great director, let down by scripts.
Oh yeah, I think recently he's been really hit or miss with his new releases. There has been some of his newest films that I really liked. One that I really like, but I think I generally agree with you on him. I think he's a really great director. He's someone that's amazing with the craft. But his screenplays can be like really iffy. Like you have House of Gucci and Napoleon that came out
Mhm,
not too long ago, and the screenplays are really wacky, to be honest. But I don't think
mhm,
anyone can deny his talent because I think he's such a really ambitious filmmaker on the scale of his movies.
mhm,
Basically, almost every of his movies have this ginormous scale with the sets, the props, and everything. Gladiator is one of
mhm.
them. Yeah, the sequel as well looks amazingly done. I don't know about the story, but um, from the trailers and the visuals, it looks nuts. And also the Alien, well, the first Alien, I think it's an amazingly done film. And he's
Mhm.
someone that I really admire because of the craft that he has. Even at his age, he's like really capable of doing insane set pieces and that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ridley Scott, at he's I don't know how old he is exactly. He's like 80 something years old, but he really, I mean, first he's not that kind of. Yeah, there's a lot of other sort of older filmmakers who are sort of worried about like, oh, I need to make these sort of last few films count because I know I'm not gonna be here forever. And Ridley Scott's just pumping out like a new film every year, every 2 years. He's just making things, and there is something I have to sort of respect about that, even if I don't like everything he puts out. He is,
I think I think he recently said something about Tarantino about his last film. And he's basically told him to stop saying that he's gonna make his last film. Like just make movies like him. Which is nuts. He has a really nuts attitude, to be honest.
yeah, I read that recently. That yeah, Ridley Scott, which I think is a fair attitude. I think honestly, I think the thing is, I think yeah, I think Ridley Scott sort of isn't that. I don't know if I want to say he's not concerned about his legacy, but I think he's more just assured in what he's doing. I think he sort of doesn't. He sort of just like I'm just gonna make what I want to make, and he's sort of not that. picky. Like he's not that bothered. I get like just sort of the vibe I get from him is he's not massively. Um, yeah, he's not a director who's like, oh, I have to, he doesn't have. I don't. Again, I don't want to say he doesn't have like a quality control sort of attitude, but he sort of doesn't. He doesn't mind putting stuff out there. Like he just keeps making films and he's sort of making what he wants to make and not worrying about like, oh, this is going to be my last film. He just sort of makes things, and I think there is something to respect about that.
I think that's one of the reasons I really like him. I generally love his comments, although some of them can be quite aggressive, but I see him as someone that's not really that doesn't really care about just making his last film or anything like most people at his age would be. But he's someone that just really loves movies, I think, and I'm really excited for the things that he has planned next. I think he is rumored to make another movie with Paul Mescal, and it's just nuts to think that someone at his age still wants to pump out as many films as he can. And yeah, I do admire him a lot.
But beyond just Ridley Scott being the director of this film, there's also um, various cast members. We've got Russell Crowe as the lead, as Maximus, and I don't think I've ever talked about Russell Crowe on the podcast before, but I don't think he's a particularly good actor. I think he's I've seen him occasionally have some really solid, really good performances. In fact, but often I just find myself thinking this could have this yeah, okay, this didn't need to be Russell Crowe. This could have been a different actor, and it would have probably been better. And this is one of his better performances, but I don't think it's like an amazing performance. I definitely don't think it's Oscar-winning worthy, which the Oscars thought was. I think he's very, um, he's not that amazing as an actor to me.
I do agree with that. Um, I think his career has been quite in a big downhill over the last how many 5 years.
Mm,
After the pandemic hit, all of his movies has been nuts. Like you have movies like I don't know, Unhinged. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a movie where he's like this road rage guy and chases a family. Have you seen it?
no, I haven't seen it. No.
It's really funny, but because it's like really, really, really bad, and he's
Hmm.
the big guy who chases the family, and he has other movies after that that are like, well, how did you end
Yeah,
up
like
here?
the Pope's Exorcist
Yeah,
and
exactly.
some.
Also Thor. I think he was a Thor. Yeah.
Yes, he was in
And
Thor, which
oh,
I didn't mind him in that. Yeah, I think he's a very sort of a very um at best he's a mediocre actor, but and I think he's also very much outshined by Joaquin Phoenix.
oh yeah,
I think
100%.
Joaquin Phoenix is. Uh, I mean, I really like Joaquin Phoenix in general as an actor. I think he's really great, and this is a really sort of good performance of it. This is sort of what sort of launched his career and made him really um, known. I don't think he was really a massively well known actor at the time, certainly. Um, and got a lot of praise, Oscar nomination. And he's I mean even now he's still a very well so revered and beloved actor. He's I'm just looking and he hadn't really done anything that's like a massive known before. Probably the most well known film he did before was probably like 8 millimeter. But Gladiator was very much his sort of first performance that got him noticed and made people sort of sit up and be like, oh, who's this Joaquin guy? And we know his career's gone since.
I love Joaquin personally. I also think he's way better than Russell Crowe in this film. And in general, I think he has had a much better career than him,
Hmm.
100%. I think he's someone really flexible with any role he has done. And even now, after many years from Gladiator, I think he's still quite a star in every film he has done. And even
Mhm.
in his most recent one, Joker, which I know a lot of people don't like. Well, Folia do. I mean, a lot of people don't like it, but I personally really liked it. And that's fine with me. And
Yeah.
even there, I think he has that quality of him that's just I don't know. He has this vibe going on with every film he has, and especially with Gladiator. I think there's something about him that just really surprised people, especially with this film, because of how
Mhm.
he can get into these roles and he approaches them in a really particular way. Like gets into the mindset of his characters. And even now,
Mhm.
he still does that, even with smaller films like Come On, and I don't know how a lot of films he has done. Well, Napoleon as well. Well, that was his
Mhm.
comeback with Ridley. But I do think um, I don't know what were the other nominees that year for supporting actor. I don't think he didn't win, right?
I mean, yeah, this is very much sort of his, yeah, a very. I mean, it's a really great role for an actor, and I think yeah, he's very good in it. So the best supporting actor nominees that year were so Benicio del Toro won for Traffic. It was nominated alongside Jeff Bridges in The Contender, Willem Dafoe in Shadow of the Vampire, Albert Finney in Erin Brockovich, and Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator.
Okay, I have not seen any of his. I heard of Erin Brockovich, but the other I'm not.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those other films except for The Contender, but I haven't seen them quite yet. Um, but I mean, I think Joaquin gives a very good performance, and he has a lot of good material to work with. I mean, there's the sort of the iconic shot in the film where he does the thumbs down, which I mean, it's a very simple image, but it works, and it sort of uh, there's a lot about it that sort of makes it stand out as a well known as a very well known image. And I think t Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix are very much your two main actors, and then the other supporting character. To be honest, I'm part of the problem I had with the film is that a lot of besides Joaquin Phoenix's character, I wasn't really that invested in any of the characters. I think it was if and I think Russell Crowe's Maximus character, if he had been played by a different actor, I could have found myself more engaged with what was happening. But I think that just because Russell Crowe is not a particularly great actor, I think that really didn't get me invested. And I think one of the things that definitely didn't help. Uh, well, I don't know if it didn't help, but it's certainly I knew the film ending, the ending of the film before I ended up seeing it because um I was in one of my film classes and we were talking about films and they were talking about the ending, and he was like, brought up the ending of Gladiator. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have to spoil the ending of Gladiator, so I'm gonna have to watch this scene, and then we'll like discuss it for one of the classes. So I did know the ending beforehand, and I don't know, I don't think that really is the reason why I wasn't invested in it. It's just that sort of if like I was like I it just made me sort of less invested. I guess I think I don't know where you stand on this, but I'm very particular about films that deal with revenge, sort of as a premise. I'm sort of very particular about how revenge is portrayed in films because I think a lot of them can be very just the way it's like I because I'm not sort of a vengeful person in real life, and I think a lot of the time it's very hard for me to get invested in stories about revenge, like something like John Wick. I don't really care for the first John Wick film that much because it's just sort of like, well, I mean, I get that they killed your dog, but like, I don't think it's worth murdering however many people, like so that's sort of I don't know. Again, I don't know where you take where you look at
Yeah,
this.
I get where you're going with this, and I
Mhm,
don't particularly agree with you. I think I really
mhm,
like revenge movies. Not that I'm a revengeful person myself, but
mhm,
um, I think in general these type of movies really hit audiences because they invest them in this whole journey where we start from point A, the character gets betrayed, and he's
mhm.
left to die, and we end in point B where this character gets the revenge. And I think what really helps, at least for me, is that it's a really extended like journey for Maximus. It's a long film. I'll be honest. That's one of the things that I was like a bit skeptical about. It's
Yeah, it is
runtime.
2.5 hours. It's very long.
Yeah, and throughout the entirety of it, I was personally quite invested. Not just because of the story
Mhm,
itself. I think also one of the things that I really love about it's the fight scenes and basically that. But for me, I think it really works because from the get go, it gets you invested in the character that Maximus was. It tells you who he was. I think it shows you his values and that, and after that, he gets completely thrown away by Commodus. And I personally
mhm,
think revenge films can be hit or miss because they
mhm,
need to get you invested from the get go. If they don't, then
mhm,
there's not really a point in that. And you also mentioned John Wick, and I think
mhm,
that's a great example of a revenge film, and also an example on how audiences react to it because you begin with the film with the bloody puppy, and
mhm,
uh, people are gonna like an animal like that, and when it's taken away and the whole film starts, well, of course people are gonna be invested. I get you though. I get where you're going. I think um, people that are not quite into stories about getting revenge or that or and I get that it may not have worked for you on it being a revenge film at all,
mhm,
but I think part of its success is that a lot of people can relate to the character of Maximus in a way because
mhm,
she's it's really strong character that goes through a really intense development throughout the entire of it. And
mhm,
I personally found myself really invested in the whole journey, and not just
mhm,
because of my personal affiliation or like the my personal story with the film, but in general, I think and my audience as well was really invested. I saw it in a really packed screening. Well, it was
mhm,
like 8 p.m. here, and even then, a lot of people came to watch it again, or well, to watch it for the first time. And I really found myself invested in the whole thing, and also part of that is the spectacle of it. It's a really big blockbuster film, and I don't know how you feel about the whole sets and the whole technical things about this film because I
This
personally was
yeah,
really amazed by all of it, even if it's like how much how when did this came out? When did the film come out?
2000?
Okay, even if like it's from 24 years ago, I still really found myself impressed watching it. I don't know how you feel.
That is one of the things I will praise about this film. I think it's a very tech. I think again, this is the same thing with Ridley Scott's films: is they are technically well made. They are well shot. They're well crafted on a technical level. The production, the effects still hold up pretty well. You know, it's a film from 24 years ago, and the VFX still hold up. You know, solidly well. It looks great. It's very well shot. I think that is just sort of, and that's the thing. Like, if I was sort of someone who is sort of more visually based than like script based, I'd probably think this was great. But it is the script that sort of lets it down. But I think it's a very well put together, well made film, and I think it looks great.
Oh yeah, I think there's some shots of it that are stuck in my head, like when he touches the field and that. I'm really impressed by all of it. It's a film that, yeah, as I mentioned, I've heard about a lot, and
Hmm.
I really enjoyed it. But I do want to hear what are your issues with it. And
Yeah, I think in terms of, I mean, we've already touched on um the sort of my general issues with the revenge sort of plot and how I just sort of can't connect with it, and or I rarely connect with it. I found the film in terms of how it was paced. It's, I mean, it's a 2.5 hour long film, and I think it could definitely be sort of cut down a bit. I think the film sort of takes a bit too long to like really get to the stuff that I is kind of interesting, like sort of get the opening sequence, and then sort of Maximus he's sent away, and I feel like there's like a long section of that film where he's just sort of away being sort of like a slave, I think it was, and I just sort of didn't find myself. But basically, I sort of wasn't. I didn't sort of. I sort of sat up a bit more when it got to him, like in the sort of in the Colosseum fighting. Like that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Again, it was, but the stuff beforehand, I just didn't find myself as engaged with it really.
I personally agree with the first point that you mentioned. I also
Hmm.
wasn't as invested as I was after from the start. I know the film begins with this really big fight, but I really was lost while watching that. And
Hmm.
I don't think it was until he started to gain some ground with the slaves that I really was hooked. I personally uh, also struggle with that. I don't think it's like a perfect film or a personal favorite of mine. I have to say
Hmm.
that, and but I do think um, it has some struggles with the pacing. I do agree with that a lot, and but I think its runtime can be a bit justified because of the nature of it, because it sort of builds up this story with between Maximus and Commodus, and the fact that it's long means that um, the ending really must pay off, and it personally did for me. I know you said that you knew the ending. I personally didn't. I didn't know it.
Hmm.
The only thing that I really knew about were the all of the gifs that I kept seeing, like the scene where Commodus puts his thumbs down, or where Maximus
Hmm.
says, "Are you entertained?" and that. But I didn't
Hmm.
really know much of it. I do agree with the beginning. I wasn't quite invested in it, and I was actually quite
Hmm.
tired. Uh, well, before that, I was really tired, but when I was watching, I was super tired from the first 30 minutes. But then I think it really hit
Hmm.
personally. And um, I also think, as I mentioned, the runtime, it is very long. I think we've said that, but
Hmm.
I personally think it ended up being justified. Although I do agree it could be cut down like 10 or 20 minutes of it. But
Hmm.
yeah. And I personally liked the side characters. I know you said you didn't, but I personally liked, for example, I don't remember her name, but Maximus' love interest, which who's going to be in the new one, I think.
Oh yeah,
It's
Connie
not.
Nielsen's.
Oh yeah. She's not someone that I particularly like was invested, but I do like the side characters a bit, and also the
Hmm.
slaves. I think that well, he makes friends with two slaves. One who's a really strong guy, another who's well, I don't remember much of him, but yeah.
Hmm.
But the thing is, I think uh, those characters, the side characters, sort of add up a bit to Maximus' whole journey.
Yeah, I think, and I do think that, like, 'cause I didn't see this in a cinema. I saw this at home on a laptop.
Oh yeah, true.
So it's not like. I think definitely if I had seen this in like a cinema, for example, I might have gone a bit more into it, just because I mean, for me, the cinema is the optimal way to see a film. So I
Definitely,
can
yeah.
very easily believe that the film would have worked better in that cinema um, setting. One thing I want to mention actually that I just remembered is Hans Zimmer did the score for this film, and I'm a big Hans Zimmer fan. I really like a lot of his music. One thing I've noticed about the score, or was pointed out to me, and I've just always noticed it, is the score for Gladiator is kind of the music he used for Pirates of the Caribbean, and
Yeah.
also inexplicably the music he used, or at least sort of was a sort of evolution of the music that he had, some music he composed for The Lion King too. But it was really noticeable when I was watching it that I was like, oh, this really is just the Pirates of the Caribbean music. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that sort of as a criticism. It's more just of an observation more than anything else.
Yeah, I joked about that with my mom, and even though she had seen it like 1,000 times, she noticed when I told her that the score really reminded me. Well, it sounded the same to Pirates of the Caribbean, and I think Hans Zimmer is definitely one of the greatest composers of all time. And
Yeah.
this score is really, really good, and I think he's someone that quite um, um, elevates himself with every other work
Hmm.
he has. I think we have to
Hmm.
mention his score for Dune, which is
Hmm.
just incredible. And I think he has quite a range when it comes to scoring films. And in this particular film, the score is, yeah, it reminds me a lot to Pirates of the Caribbean, like you mentioned. I thought that was just a silly thing for me, but apparently it's not. Apparently, yeah, a lot of people heard the score and they said, "Oh, this is the Pirates of the Caribbean score, right?" And that's
Yeah.
what I said in my mind when I was watching it. But I think,
Mhm.
um, as you mentioned, Hans Zimmer is someone who really evolves himself, and well, he took a lot of pieces from this score into his next score, and yeah, I personally really like the score of this film. I think it sets up
Mhm.
the tone very well. Even in more quieter scenes, I think, uh, well, I don't know how you'd say this, the more angelical score. Yeah, I think
Angelic,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, I think it really stuck with me, especially in those like dream sequences where he's seeing his family and he's in the
Mhm.
field. Those are really iconic, like pieces of, well, the score and also the visuals of the film. And I think Hans Zimmer is definitely 100% one of the greatest, and he's very flexible with this film. And yeah,
Yeah. I think for me anyway, I think Hans Zimmer, like he is a great composer, but it has been a while since I think he sort of had a really great score. I think he kind of does a lot of the same things now, and that's not necessarily a problem. It's just sort of he's not doing stuff on the level of stuff like when he did The Lion King or Rain Man or anything like that, or Inception even. Inception's not that old, but the score for Inception is fantastic. But I think this is amongst his some of his better work. Definitely, I think it's a really great score. And I think yeah, in general, I really like Hans Zimmer. So that's an again the sort of a lot of the technical aspects of what I appreciate and enjoy about the film. It's just sort of more of the, yeah, in terms of the plot where I sort of stumble a little bit. So yeah, I don't dislike this film. I think like on the I would say it is a perfectly fine film. Um, but it I don't love it. Like I can just based on this, and as you said, you're quite a big fan of it. And that is why I asked you to do this, because I knew you were a big fan. I thought it would be really interesting to get a fan on, because I went in. I didn't go in. I try not to go into films with expectations if I can avoid it. But I did. I sort of thinking sort of on the outside, being like, this isn't like my kind of film, so it's got a bit of an uphill battle for me to um enjoy it. But I think like there's elements I do quite like, but there's also elements in the sense of what I find more important that I don't like, and that's sort of the thing holding me back more than anything else is that I didn't get massively invested in it. I think the idea of it, like there are certain elements and ideas that I do really like, with sort of the afterlife set moments in the film where he's sort of walking through that field, like that's very well staged and crafted and shot, when he's with his, like that's really great in concept. It's just there's sort of not enough of those kind of moments throughout the film's runtime for me.
I think what you're saying is very valid. I know that it's
Hmm.
might not, it's really different from your taste, and um I personally had the same experience before going into, because I really wanted to check it out, but I didn't really know if I was going to like love it or anything.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think, at least for me, what, and as I mentioned, was struck with me was the main two characters, Maximus and Commodus. I think this story is something that's really just, at least for me, was incredibly epic to watch. And I personally think this is quite an epic film. And
Hmm.
uh, but yeah, I think it's really I think we both agree that it's quite different from our personal tastes. And but in your case,
Hmm.
I get that you personally didn't like love it, and that's totally fine. I'm really up to people having different opinions about films that I love. But
Hmm.
I think we can mostly agree that a lot of it is just, how can I say this? I think the film has had really big impact. As personally,
Hmm.
I think in culture and in general, it's one of the films that I think anyone in my family has watched except for me. And
Hmm.
I think that goes to most people. I think this is really an iconic film, and
Hmm.
I don't know if would have hold up in like, I don't know how many, 10 years. But as of
Hmm.
now, it's one that I'm really really liked in general. And but I do get you. I have to say that. And yeah, I have to say I'm unbelievably excited for the sequel. I
Hmm.
think I have not heard the reactions. I've only seen a, like only a few messages of it. I don't know anything about the Oscar prospects in general. I don't really care about that at this point for it. But I think the first one has made an impact on me, and that I'm just unbelievably excited to watch what Ridley has done with this new film. And I think it's gonna be massive in the box office,
Hmm.
100%. Yeah, but also how he extends on the legacy of this film with this new one. From what I've seen, well, the protagonist is the kid from this film.
Hmm.
Now it's Paul Mescal, and I think there might be some sort of things related to Maximus in this, as from what I've seen in the trailer. But I'm really excited to check it out. Also from the performances, yeah. How, I don't know,
Hmm.
how do you feel about this sequel? And that's something that I also wanted to know.
I'm I I can't say that I'm massively excited for it. I don't, to be honest, I don't think Gladiator needed a sequel. I certainly don't think it needed a sequel 24 years later. But I like Paul Mescal. I like Pedro Pascal. I like Denzel Washington. So I'm not going in with like massively high expectations, but I can't say I'm like I don't think I'll think it's particularly bad per se. I'm going in with no real expectations because I don't know. I could see myself liking it more than the first one. I could see myself liking it less. I could see myself thinking it's basically the same. I really am not sure as to what I'll make of it. Really, I've seen the trailers. They look decent. They're not like particularly standing out to me as like great looking trailers or anything. But I don't really. For me, trailers are sort of not like a real like in sort of the sense of like trailers. I mean I don't really watch trailers sort of in general. I sort of more just because I'm not massively interested in seeing trailers because I'm just sort of like, well, I'll just go see that movie anyway. I don't need to see the trailers because I'm gonna go see it. Um, but you see trailers when you're at the cinema and everything, and I think it
Yeah,
looks
that's how I
it
watched the
looks
trailer of this.
yeah. I think that was the first time saw it. I that's the first time I saw it was I was at the cinema seeing. I don't remember what it was I was seeing, but I saw it at a cinema. And yeah, I don't know what I'll make of it, but I'm going in with a decent, as open a mind as I can. Um, I mean, is there anything else you really want to say before we wrap this up?
I want to say, well, first of all, thank you, William. I think, well, this is a first time for me. Like in general, I've never been invited to any sort of podcast or anything, and um, it's been quite fun to talk about this. I think you and I have different mindsets about this whole
Hmm.
film in general, and I think that's makes up for a really interesting conversation. And I really like talking to you, and I really like
Thank
this
you.
whole this whole conversation. Yeah, and
Hmm.
I also have to mention that. Oh yeah, I'm excited. I'm honestly really 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 like happy that I'm gonna watch it like a week before the Americans, and I think you and I are gonna watch it a week before most people.
Yeah,
But
I might just watch it just because yeah, it comes out on Thursday this week, which will be tomorrow, I think, when this goes out because I put these out on Wednesday, so it'll be tomorrow. I'll go see this. So yeah, I might go see it, like a 10 a.m. showing. Go see it and see what I make of it. Just before we wrap up, I put ratings on films when I talk about them.
oh,
Do you want
nice.
to put a rating on Gladiator? I give it a 6. Because I liked it more than disliking it. 6 is sort of like I've got some issues with it, but it's like a positive negative, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah, I
it's
get it.
like positive, slightly skewing towards the negative side, but it's still on a positive angle.
Yeah, that's most of my six are. And personally, I think Gladiator is a nine for me, a total flip. But
Hmm.
yeah, um, I think nines for me are for movies that really impacted me in a way. I do admit they are not perfect in any way, but I really liked watching it and I enjoyed the whole experience of it and also resonated a bit. Not really a favorite of mine, I have to admit.
Hmm.
But for me, Gladiator, it's I personally love it. I think it has a lot of history in me for what I mentioned with my mother and but yeah, it's a nine for me. I watch it again. Yeah, I really want to watch it again, but like in 10 years, as I mentioned, I want to see if it holds up because I know for a lot of
Hmm.
people it doesn't hold up. So yeah,
Hmm.
I give it a 9 out of 10, and
Yeah.
it's not a 10 for me. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for joining me for this week, this week's podcast. Is there anything you wanted to plug before I wrap this up?
Oh yeah, I want to plug my letterbox. Wait, let me check it
Hmm.
out. My
Yep.
letterbox is um wait a minute. I don't know how to say this in fucking English. Okay, my letterbox is Mariano underscore Venegas with UB, and yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just find that you wish to foreign marry on Letterboxd. And yeah, thank you all for listening to this week's episode. Thank you, Mary, for joining me for this week's episode.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you all also for listening to this. And check
Yeah,
out the
yeah,
other
yeah.
episodes from William, please.
Oh, well, you've just that's what I said, but you've said it all for me, so thank you. Yeah, just do that, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Goodbye.